Capricorn. People keep doing a small double take when they learn how much time you've actually lived. And I want to sit with you inside that reaction for a while because I don't think it means what most people assume it means. It isn't really about a face. Faces are easy to explain away with luck or good habits, and that explanation would leave the most interesting part untouched. What actually startles people, though they rarely have the words for it, is a mismatch they can feel more than see, a gap between the number they expected and the frequency you're actually giving off. Something about you doesn't match the tally. And I want to be honest with you right from the start. There is no single tidy reason for it. It isn't one secret. It's several separate things running quietly through you at once, each fairly ordinary on its own, that happen to braid together into something time hasn't been able to standardize. Let me follow each of those threads with you, one at a time, and then show you the place where they all meet. The first thread is the simplest, and it lives in your eyes before it lives anywhere else. You never stopped being genuinely curious. Somewhere along the way, most people quietly decide they've seen enough, that the world has shown them its hand, and there's little left to be surprised by. And the moment that decision settles in, something behind the eyes goes still. Yours didn't. You still lean toward things. You still want to know how something works, what a person meant, what's around a corner you haven't turned yet. That leaning toward is visible. It keeps a brightness in the gaze that has nothing to do with skin and everything to do with appetite for the world. And that particular kind of noticing, the refusal to assume you already know, is a large part of why people find their way to Sarah Angel Tarot in the first place, because it's the same instinct that makes a person want to look a little deeper than the surface. The second thread is your relationship with time itself, which is quietly unusual. Most people live at war with the clock. They rush through the parts they don't like and clutch at the parts they do. And that constant grip, that low-grade urgency wears on a person in a way that shows you move differently. There's an unhurried quality to how you inhabit a stretch of time, a sense that you're not being chased through it. You let things take the time they take. And a nervous system that isn't perpetually braced against the passing of the hours simply ages differently, more slowly, more gently, because it isn't spending its energy fighting the very thing it can't stop. You made a kind of peace with time that most people never manage, and time, it seems, has been quietly gentler with you in return. The third thread runs through your emotions, and it's one of the most useful things about you, though it's completely invisible. You can still be surprised. Your heart never hardened into the flat, seen-it-all texture that so many people mistake for maturity. You can still be moved by something small. You can still be delighted, genuinely, without irony, the way a person is delighted before they learn to guard against looking naive. That emotional suppleness is rare, and it's protective in a way people don't realize. A heart that stays flexible keeps the whole system supple. When you refuse to let feeling calcify into cynicism, you keep something limber at your core, and that limberness radiates outward into everything, including the way you carry yourself through a room. Notice already how these threads reach for each other, because that's the whole point. Your curiosity feeds your capacity to be surprised, and your unhurried relationship with time gives both of them room to breathe. None of these things stands alone in you. They lean on one another. And here is a fourth strand woven right through them. You kept your playfulness. Somewhere in you, there's still a person who finds things funny, who isn't too dignified to be silly, who hasn't traded every ounce of lightness for the heavy costume of being taken seriously. Play is one of the first casualties of growing older, and its loss shows on a face more than almost anything. You held on to yours. You still let yourself be light. And lightness, the actual physical quality of not being weighed down, is one of the truest fountains there is. The fifth thread is subtler and lives in what you don't carry. You have a way of processing things and then letting them move through you, rather than storing them in your body like sediment. Most people accumulate. They hold on to old grievances, old fears, old versions of a story that hurt them, and all of that gets warehoused somewhere in the muscles and the breath and the set of the jaw. You tend to metabolize instead. You feel a thing fully and then you release it. And because you aren't hauling around the compounded weight of everything that ever went wrong, you don't move like someone burdened. There's a lightness in the body that comes only from a mind that doesn't hoard its wounds. And yours has learned, maybe without ever naming it, how to set things down. Let me follow a sixth thread because it explains something the others don't quite reach. You meet change as movement rather than as threat. For a great many people, change becomes the enemy somewhere along the way, and they spend enormous effort trying to freeze their life into a shape that feels safe, and that resistance to change is itself a kind of aging, a stiffening, a bracing against the flow of things. You've kept more fluid than that. When something shifts, some part of you is willing to shift with it rather than dig in. And fluidity, the willingness to bend and adapt and become slightly new, is the opposite of the rigidity that time uses to age a person. Rivers don't grow old the way stones do. You've stayed more river than stone. Here is a seventh strand, and it's one of the most powerful because it's so easy to overlook. You are actually present. So much of what reads as age isn't really age at all. It's absence, the vacant quality of a person who is physically here but mentally somewhere in the past or the anxious future, running old tapes, rehearsing worries. You have a real capacity to be here in the actual moment you're standing in, and presence has no age. A person who is fully present is lit from a different source than the calendar. When you're genuinely in the room, genuinely listening, genuinely tasting your own life as it happens, you step outside of time in a small way, and that steadiness in the now is something people feel the instant they're near you, even if they'd never think to call it what it is. This is exactly the kind of thread a reading here on Sarah Angel Tarot loves to follow. The invisible reason behind a visible impression. The quiet mechanism underneath a thing everyone notices but no one can quite explain. And there's an eighth thread I don't want to miss because it's woven tightly through the others. You stopped performing for approval a while ago, or maybe you never fully started. There's a self-possession in you that doesn't need the constant reassurance of being liked. And that inner steadiness reads strangely as youth. It reads as youth because anxiety ages a face, and the particular anxiety of always wondering whether you're acceptable is one of the most aging of all. When a person quietly knows who they are and stops auditioning for everyone else's approval, the tension drains out of them, and what's left is something clear and unbothered, and yes, young, because ease itself looks young. Consider a ninth strand, one that surprises people when they finally notice it in you. Your willingness to keep being a beginner. Most people arrange their lives past a certain point to only ever do the things they're already good at, because being a beginner is uncomfortable and a little humbling. You still let yourself start. You'll pick up something new even knowing you'll be clumsy at it, even knowing you'll be the least skilled person in the room. That willingness to be new at something is one of the most vitalizing choices a human being can make because it keeps you learning, and a learning mind stays plastic and alive in a way that a mind resting entirely on its old competence simply doesn't. Every time you consent to be a beginner, you pour a little more youth back into yourself. And a 10th thread, close to the last one, but distinct. Your imagination never went quiet. You still picture things. You still dream forward. Still let your mind wander into futures and possibilities and what ifs. Still furnish inner rooms that don't exist yet. A lot of people let their imagination atrophy once the practical business of living takes over, and an unused imagination is a kind of premature aging of the spirit, a narrowing of the inner world down to only what's already real. Yours stayed wide. You kept the lights on in the imaginative part of you, and a person whose inner life is still generating new pictures carries a spark that the merely practical lose. That spark is part of what people are catching when they look at you and feel the arithmetic doesn't add up. There's a further strand, I don't want to leave unnamed, and it lives in your laughter. You still laugh easily. Not the polite managed laugh people learn to perform, but the real kind. The kind that catches you off guard and moves through your whole body before you can compose yourself. Easy laughter is one of the great preservatives of the human face because it keeps the muscles loose and the breath deep and the whole system flushed with something that actively restores. A person who has stopped laughing from the belly ages in a particular tightened way, as if the face slowly forgets how to open. Yours hasn't forgotten. You still let things be funny, still let delight take you over, and every real laugh is a small act of renewal you're performing without even trying. Another strand runs through the way you meet people. You never close the door on new ones. It would have been easy, past a certain point, to decide your circle was complete, that you'd met everyone you needed to meet and had no more room for strangers. Plenty of people quietly make that decision, and it shows, because someone who has stopped being curious about others develops a certain guardedness, a slight suspicion, a closing of the face toward anyone unfamiliar. You kept the door propped open. You still find people interesting, still want to know their stories, still let someone new surprise you. That ongoing openness to other human beings keeps something warm and available in your expression, an unguarded quality that reads instantly as younger than the guarded alternative. Here is a quieter strand, one that lives in your capacity for awe. You still stop for things. A certain quality of light, a piece of music that catches you, the particular way an ordinary evening settles into itself, and something in you actually pauses to feel it rather than rushing past. Awe is not a small thing. When a person lets themselves be genuinely struck by beauty, the whole system resets for a moment. The worries quiet, the grip on time loosens, and something gets restored that the daily grind steadily depletes. Most people train themselves out of awe because it feels impractical, and in doing so, they lose one of the most rejuvenating experiences a human being has access to. You kept the capacity. And every time the world stops you in your tracks, you take a small drink from a very deep well. There's a strand in how loosely you hold your own self-image, and it matters more than it seems. Some people, past a certain point, decide exactly who they are and then defend that definition for the rest of their lives, refusing any evidence that they might be changing, growing, becoming someone slightly new. That rigidity of identity is its own kind of aging, a refusal to keep moving. You've held your sense of self more loosely than that. You allow yourself to still be in progress, to surprise yourself, to change your mind, to become. And a person who is still becoming carries an unfinished, forward-leaning quality that a fully settled person loses. You didn't file yourself away as complete, and that openness to your own ongoing becoming is one of the most youthful postures there is. Another strand shows in the way you live inside your own body. Many people, as time passes, begin to relate to their body mainly as an object to be inspected and worried over a thing that is failing them, and that anxious adversarial relationship shows in how they hold themselves. You've kept, more than most, a sense of your body as an instrument for living rather than an object to be judged. You use it. You move through your life inside it rather than standing outside it critiquing it. And a person who inhabits their body, who is at home in it, who moves like someone living rather than someone bracing, carries an ease of motion that anxious self-monitoring can never produce. Being at home in your own skin is a kind of youth that has nothing to do with the skin itself. A tender strand lives in how readily you let people off the hook. You don't tend to build monuments to the ways others have wronged you. Grudges are heavy, and they settle into a face over time, pulling it toward a permanent, subtle hardness, a wariness around the eyes and mouth that the person carrying it usually can't even feel anymore. You've stayed lighter than that. You forgive, not because you're a pushover, but because you understood somewhere deep, that carrying an offense costs you far more than it ever cost the one who caused it. A face unburdened by a lifetime of stored resentment stays softer, more open, more approachable, which is exactly the quality people register as younger. Setting people down when they've hurt you has kept your own expression from calcifying into defense. Here's a livelier strand. You still say yes to things. You haven't fully surrendered to the pull toward the predictable and the already known. When something unexpected offers itself, some part of you still leans toward the possibility rather than reflexively declining it in favor of comfort. That willingness to let your life stay a little unscripted keeps you in ongoing contact with novelty. And novelty is food for a young mind. People who have arranged their existence to eliminate all surprise slowly go gray on the inside, no matter what they look like on the outside. You kept some room for the unplanned, and that openness to what you didn't see coming keeps a brightness lit in you that fully defended lives quietly extinguish. There's a strand of gentle defiance in you toward one particular lie, the one that whispers, "It's too late." So many people foreclose their own futures long before they need to, deciding that certain doors have closed simply because a certain amount of time has passed, and that foreclosure ages them faster than almost anything, because a person who believes their best possibilities are behind them soon starts to live like it. You've resisted that story in the ways that matter. Some part of you still trusts there are chapters ahead worth reaching for, things you might still do, versions of your life not yet lived. That refusal to declare yourself finished keeps you oriented toward what's coming rather than only what's gone. And forward-facing people carry a hope in their posture that backward-facing people lose. And a warm strand runs through your gratitude. You have a way, more than most, of noticing what's good rather than only cataloging what's missing. Gratitude does something specific to a face over time, softening it, opening it, keeping the eyes from settling into the downward pull of chronic dissatisfaction. A person oriented toward what they have carries a lightness that a person fixated on what they lack can never quite fake. You've kept your gaze tilted toward the good, and that habitual appreciation has quietly shaped how you see the world and, in turn, how the world reads you. Gratitude is not only a passing feeling across a life, it's a sculptor, and it has been kind to you. There's a strand here that runs against everything the busy world preaches, and it's your permission to rest. You haven't fully bought the belief that your worth is measured by how relentlessly you push yourself, and because of that, you actually let yourself recover, let yourself be still sometimes, let yourself do nothing without guilt gnawing at you the whole while. Exhaustion is one of the most aging states a body can live in, that chronic, wrung out depletion so many people wear like a badge. You've kept, more than most, some access to real rest, the kind that restores rather than merely pauses. A rested nervous system moves and responds and shows up differently than a depleted one. The ease you carry isn't laziness. It's the visible result of someone who understood somewhere along the way that running yourself into the ground is not a virtue, and that a life with room to breathe in, it stays younger than a life spent perpetually sprinting. Another strand lives in what you've opted out of, and it's the quiet competition around aging that consumes so much of other people's energy. You've largely stepped off that particular track, the one where everyone anxiously measures themselves against everyone else, watching for signs of decline, comparing and ranking and dreading. That comparison game is exhausting, and it ages the people who play it, because it keeps them in a permanent low crouch of worry about where they stand. You've stayed freer of it than most, more interested in living your own life than in monitoring how it stacks up against anyone else's. That freedom leaves your energy available for actual living rather than draining it into a race no one ever wins. A person who isn't secretly competing carries a lightness that a person locked in constant comparison simply can't, and that lightness is one more thing people feel without ever being able to name it. Now let me bring these threads together, because I promised you a meeting place, and here it is. Set them side by side, every strand I've named. The curiosity and the easy relationship with time. The unhardened heart and the held onto playfulness. The habit of releasing rather than storing. The fluidity in the face of change. The real presence. The quiet self-possession. The easy laughter. The openness to new people. The capacity for awe. The loosely held sense of self. The ease inside your own body. The readiness to forgive. The spontaneity. The refusal of the too late story. The ease of real rest. The freedom from comparison, the living imagination, and the grateful gaze. Notice that they are not a long list of separate things at all. They are all expressions of a single underlying orientation. Every one of them is a form of staying open. That's the thread beneath the threads, the one they all turn out to be. Time doesn't primarily age people through the count of their days. It ages them through closure, through the slow, understandable habit of shutting doors, narrowing focus, deciding, hardening, protecting. You kept the doors open. And an open system stays young in a way a closed one cannot, because openness is literally the posture of aliveness. Let me name something about how you experience time itself, because it deepens everything else. There's a difference between living a long time and living a wide life, and you've done more of the second than most. A life lived wide, full of novelty and attention and genuine presence, actually feels more spacious from the inside and yet keeps the person younger, because novelty stretches time and engagement renews it. People who let their days blur into identical repetitions experience time collapsing, speeding up, graying over, and it ages them from within. Your days have kept their distinctness because you've kept paying attention, and a life of distinct, fully inhabited days stays green in a way that mere duration never threatens. You've been living wide, and width, far more than length, is the real measure of a young life. Let me offer you an image for all of this, because sometimes an image holds what an explanation can't reach. There's a quality in you, like early morning, that persists no matter what hour your life is technically keeping, a freshness that doesn't seem to know it's supposed to have faded. Some people carry a season inside them that has nothing to do with the season they're standing in. And you carry something like an early, unhurried, dew-still morning, the part of the day when everything still feels possible and unspent. That inner weather is why the outer count feels wrong to people. They're reading the morning in you and can't reconcile it with what they were told to expect. But there's no contradiction that needs resolving. You can carry morning inside you at any point along the road, and you plainly do, and that inner freshness is worth far more than any calendar's opinion of where you happen to be standing. So when someone does that small double take at the mismatch between your age and your presence, understand what they're actually reacting to. They're not really surprised by your skin. They're surprised by your openness, though they don't have that word for it. Somewhere in them, mostly unconsciously, they've come to associate a certain number with a certain closing down, a settling, a dimming. And you contradict that association simply by being open and lit and interested. Their surprise is the sound of a stereotype quietly breaking in their hands. You are living proof that the dimming isn't inevitable. And some deep part of them registers that as almost impossible because they've seen so few examples of it. Their shock is a compliment they don't fully understand. They're paying you. I want to be careful here to name what this is really about, because it would be easy to hear all of this as being about looking good, and that would shrink it into something far smaller than it is. This is not vanity. This is vitality. The youthfulness people are sensing in you is not a surface achievement to be protected with products and worry. It's the visible overflow of how alive you actually are on the inside. The looks are downstream. The real thing is the aliveness, the open, curious, present, unhurried way of being that happens to show up on the outside as a kind of agelessness. If you only ever chased the outward look, you'd miss the point entirely and probably lose the very thing that creates it. The invitation isn't to preserve a surface. It's to keep tending the aliveness that the surface is only reflecting. I want to correct one thing you might be tempted to believe, which is that this youthfulness is a kind of naivety, an innocence that simply hasn't yet been touched by life. It isn't. Yours is something rarer and stronger than that. You've clearly been touched by life. You felt its weight. You know what it can do, and you chose openness anyway. That's not the openness of someone who has never been hurt. It's the hard-won openness of someone who has been and decided not to let it close them. That informed kind of openness, the kind that knows better and stays soft regardless, is the most beautiful version there is, because it isn't fragile. It's a choice made again and again by someone with every reason to choose otherwise. You are not young because you don't know. You're young because you know, and you stayed open anyway. Let me speak gently to how this is protected, because it can be dimmed, and I'd rather you guard it consciously than lose it by accident. The threats to this kind of youthfulness are almost never physical. They're internal. The main one is a slow closing of the heart, usually in response to disappointment, a quiet decision that it's safer to expect less, feel less, hope less. Every time you resist that particular temptation, every time you choose to stay open even after being hurt, you protect the wellspring. Another threat is the creep of bitterness, which is really just curiosity gone sour. Guard against letting your interest in the world curdle into a settled verdict against it. As long as you keep choosing openness over armor, wonder over cynicism, the source stays clear, and it will keep doing for you what it's always done. There's something worth noticing about what your energy does to the people around you, because it doesn't stay contained in you. Openness is quietly contagious. When people spend time near someone who is genuinely curious, unhurried, present, and light, something in them tends to loosen too, almost against their will. You give the people around you a small silent permission to be more open themselves, to lower their own armor a little, to remember that the dimming isn't mandatory. You may not realize how often you've done this, but part of the effect you have on others, part of why your presence is welcome, is that you make the room a little more alive just by being your open self inside it. You're not only staying young, you're quietly reminding other people that they're allowed to notice, if you ever have, how children and animals tend to respond to you, because they are the most honest instruments for this. Little ones and creatures don't read faces for age. They read energy directly, without the interpreting layer that adults lay over everything. And they tend to gravitate toward exactly the kind of open, present, unguarded quality you carry, because it feels safe and warm and alive to them. If children seem easy around you, if animals settle near you, unbothered and drawn in, take it as confirmation of everything I've been describing, because they're responding to the frequency underneath the face, and their instincts don't lie. They're picking up the same youthfulness the adults are startled by. They simply feel no need to be surprised by it. I don't want you to think any of this happened to you by luck, because that would rob you of something you earned. This openness of yours is not an accident of temperament that you can take no credit for. It's the sum of 1,000 small choices, most of them made without any grand intention, each one nudging you towards staying open rather than closing down. Every time you let yourself be curious instead of dismissive. Every time you chose to be surprised instead of jaded. Every time you released a hurt instead of filing it away, you were tending this thing, whether you knew it or not. The agelessness people notice is not a gift you were handed. It's a garden you've been quietly keeping, and the fact that you kept it without even naming it makes it more yours, not less. Here's a thought I want you to sit with, because it reframes the whole trajectory ahead of you. This quality doesn't have a peak that you're at risk of passing. The kind of youthfulness that comes from openness has a strange relationship with time, in that it can actually deepen as you go rather than fade. A person can become more curious, more present, more fluid, more willing to begin again, as the seasons accumulate, not less. So the best of this may genuinely still be ahead of you. The version of you further along the path, if you keep tending the openness, could carry even more of this light than you carry now, because you'll have had more time to practice the very things that generate it. Nothing about this says the shine is behind you. If anything, it says you're just getting good at it. Let me point out the mirror people keep holding up to you, because I want you to actually believe what it's reflecting. When someone reacts with surprise to your age, they are, without meaning to, showing you something true about yourself that you might be too close to see. It's easy to dismiss their reaction as politeness or exaggeration, to wave it off, to not quite let it in. But I gently encourage you to receive it instead, not as flattery, but as data. They are picking up on something real. The frequency they're responding to is genuinely there. So the next time you catch that double take, instead of deflecting it, let it land and let it remind you of what your own way of living is quietly generating. Their surprise is an accurate reading of your aliveness. You're allowed to trust it. If any part of you has been made to feel by a world that can be careless about these things, that the time you've lived is somehow a liability, I'd like to set that idea down for you gently. The number attached to your age is not what people are responding to when they light up around you. What they're responding to is everything you've grown into. All the openness and ease and depth that only a life actually lived can produce. You couldn't have this quality without the road behind you, which means the very thing you might have been taught to downplay is inseparable from the thing that makes you magnetic. Your age isn't in tension with your youthfulness. It's the soil it grew in. There's nothing to apologize for and nothing to hide. The whole of what you've lived is precisely what makes the light so surprising to everyone who meets it. I want to draw out one more subtlety because it completes the picture. The very fact that you may not have realized any of this about yourself is itself part of the youthfulness. There's an unself-consciousness in you, a lack of preening, a way of being open and curious and present without turning it into a performance or a project. That unself-consciousness is a form of innocence in the truest sense, not naivety, but a lack of calculation, and it's one of the most quietly magnetic things a person can carry. If you'd been managing this energy deliberately, curating it, it would read as effort, and effort ages a face. Because it's simply who you are, it reads as ease, and ease is timeless. The unawareness was part of the magic. Now you know, and the trick will be to know it without turning it into something you strain to keep. I want to gently turn all of this back toward how you see yourself, because you may be the last person to fully register what everyone else does. It's a strange feature of being human that we're often blind to the very quality others find most striking in us, too close to it, too accustomed to being ourselves to notice. So the next time you catch your own reflection, I'd invite you to try, just for a moment, to look with the eyes of the people who do that little double take, to see the openness and the aliveness they see, rather than only the details you've trained yourself to scrutinize. You've been carrying this light so long that it's gone invisible to you. Let their surprise teach you to see it again. The person in that reflection is far more luminous than your own habitual glance has been giving them credit for. And it's about time you met them the way the rest of the world already does. Let me leave you with what all of this asks of you, which is almost nothing, and that's the beauty of it. You don't have to do anything new. You don't have to add a regimen or chase a look or worry about maintaining what you have. The single thing this asks of you is to keep choosing openness again and again in all the small daily ways you've already been choosing it. Stay curious, stay unhurried where you can. Keep your heart soft even when the world gives you reasons to harden it. Keep beginning things, keep imagining, keep being present to your own life as it actually unfolds. Do those things, and the rest takes care of itself, because the rest was always only the visible echo of those choices. And as this reading settles toward its close, I want you to carry away the real headline underneath the surprising one. The thing people are reacting to isn't a lucky face. It's a way of being alive that time hasn't been able to standardize, a openness you've kept lit while so many around you let theirs dim. That's not vanity to protect. It's vitality to keep tending. And it will keep giving back to you for as long as you keep the doors open. Whenever you want to be reminded of what your own energy is actually doing, this space, Sarah Angel Tarot, will be here to reflect it back to you, plainly and warmly. Go gently now, and go with the quiet confidence of someone who finally understands why the room lights up a little when they walk into it. You were never behind the clock. You've simply been living in a way it can't touch.